Welcome to Have You Read It? The channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today we're diving into Rob Copeland's The Fund, Ray Dalio, Bridgewater Associates, and the Unraveling of a Wall Street Legend. This book isn't just a biography. It's an expose on the inner workings, the culture, and the complexities surrounding Ray Dalio and his hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates. The story begins with a scene of Paul McDowell, a consultant, overwhelmed after receiving a job offer from Ray Dalio in December 2008, a time when Dalio's Bridgewater Associates was thriving amid the financial crisis. McDowell's initial impression of Bridgewater was positive, noting Dalio's hands-on approach and the staff's apparent awe of him. He was drawn in by the prospect of advising the firm's management committee and contributing to Bridgewater's unique values. However, the narrative quickly shifts to reveal a darker side, contrasting McDowell's positive experience with the meltdown of another Bridgewater employee, Katina Stefanova, in 2009. This sets the stage for an exploration of Bridgewater's intense and often ruthless culture, which is underpinned by Dalio's principles. To understand Dalio, the book takes us back to his early life, which began in a middle-class Long Island suburb. There he caddied at the Links Golf Club, where he interacted with wealthy Wall Street figures. One such figure was Isabel Lieb, who helped Dalio get his career started by introducing him to her family's brokerage and then sending him to Europe to mentor her troubled grandson. His work for Gordon B. Lee provided Dalio a summer job working for him as a junior clerk at Benton, Corcoran, Lieb & Co. Dalio attended Harvard Business School, where he stood out with his technical analyst approach. Early jobs at Dominick & Dominick Commodities and Shearson Hayden Stone were followed by a firing from Shearson for unprofessional behavior. After the firing, Lieb helped Dalio. In 1975, Barbara Garbaldone, introduced to Dalio by a friend, used her family wealth and connections to further his career. Dalio started Bridgewater Associates in 1975 out of his apartment, initially focusing on commodities and advisory work. By 1981, Dalio was gaining notoriety for his pessimistic economic predictions, even testifying before Congress. Despite his confidence, his forecast of a major economic collapse proved inaccurate. The book recounts the events of New Year's Eve, 1974, when Dalio got into a heated argument with his boss, and drunk, slugged his boss in the face over a momentary disagreement, which resulted in his getting fired. However, the experience led him to refine his approach, emphasizing research and risk management. He launched a daily market commentary letter, attracting clients like Bunker Hunt. He then found a partnership with Paul Tudor Jones that ultimately didn't work out because of his investment system had a Sharpe ratio of less than 1.0. Hilda Ochoa-Brillemberg of the World Bank gave Dalio his first big break, entrusting him with $5 million to manage, though their relationship eventually soured. Bridgewater's early strategy focused on hedging, helping companies manage risk, but Dalio later sought higher returns through alpha overlay. Black Monday in 1987 proved beneficial for Bridgewater, as Dalio had correctly anticipated the market crash. However, Dalio's appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show led to controversy due to his remarks about Japanese people. Dalio marketed Bridgewater to institutional investors like pension funds, emphasizing risk management. Rusty Olson of Eastman Kodak was convinced by Dalio's approach. Bob Prince, a key figure, joined Bridgewater and contributed significantly to its investment strategies, particularly in bonds. By the early 1990s, Bridgewater's assets under management grew significantly, reaching $1.2 billion in 1992 and nearly double the year after. Dalio began to codify his management philosophy, which would eventually become the principles. These principles emphasized rationality, truth-seeking, and a willingness to confront mistakes. However, the implementation of these principles also led to a culture of constant evaluation and criticism within Bridgewater. The book details the rise of Greg Jensen, who became Dalio's protege and a key figure in implementing the principles. Jensen's background and personality are explored, highlighting his dedication to Dalio's vision. In 2009, Katina Stefanova's failure to meet hiring goals led to a brutal interrogation by Dalio, which was recorded and used as a training tool within Bridgewater. This incident exemplifies the firm's culture of radical transparency and its emphasis on confronting weaknesses. The consequences of not fitting into Bridgewater's culture could be severe, as illustrated by the experience of Britt Harris, who was brought in as CEO but quickly faltered and resigned, suffering a breakdown. The baseball cards, later known as the collector, were introduced as a tool for evaluating employees based on the principles. This system aimed to create a meritocracy but also fostered a competitive and sometimes cutthroat environment. Dalio's management style included beatdowns as a way to test employees, but these often resulted in humiliation and tears. The book also shows that the application of those principles could be rather selectively applied. The author discusses key figures at Bridgewater, like Bob Prince and Greg Jensen, and emphasizes the extreme emphasis on the principles at the firm. Paul McDowell was brought in to help apply the principles. However, these figures and the principles also came to bizarre, unsettling results. The book then shifts back to more of Dalio's personal life. Dalio became close to the Leibs and the Vanderbilt Whitneys, whose wealth informed his view of finance. He then founded Bridgewater and faced an early financial crisis, but steadied by emphasizing long-term client relationships. Dalio's persona is that of a hyena, and the early days at Bridgewater involved practices that seemed more aligned with performance than ethics, such as potentially abusive workplace practices. To show the importance of image, Dalio brought in Chris Strite, a marketer, because Dalio understood that he was not projecting the right image for the firm. The author makes a parallel between Dalio's view of his role and the Darwinian idea of the survival of the fittest. By the early 2000s, Bridgewater had total authority to manage assets. But the author notes the importance of understanding that to Ray Dalio, relationships are all that matters, as opposed to assets. The author walks through the importance of what it means to have and hold power. And this concept explains why Dalio's views are generally uncontested. With Bridgewater on the rise, Ray had a chance to define and control reality. And what he did was create Bridgewater University. The mission was to indoctrinate and instill. And so long as you adhere to those principles, you can thrive and move up the ladder in Bridgewater. The process had a certain religious tone. This process resulted in the opposite result than might be expected, although Dalio was against emotion. His methods resulted in many mental breakdowns. And although the culture was meant to encourage people to be their authentic selves, what it really meant to make people act and believe as Dalio did. One of the key challenges that Dalio and Bridgewater faced was maintaining a consistent brand with competing views, but also in translating the model for international operations. The author describes a series of power plays that resulted, and in what appeared to be a sudden odd decision, Dalio put all of this aside to pursue his own passion. When it came to issues of bad behavior, though, it wasn't the crime, it was the cover-up. This made the internal dynamics more critical. The last key aspect of Part 1 was the author discussing who was really running Bridgewater. Although so much of the media attributed every decision to Ray, that was not the case. It was his protege, Greg Jensen, who was making key choices. As it would happen, this could only last so long. As the book moves into Part 2, the story centers on Ray and Greg, with Greg and others at Bridgewater setting out to understand, capture, and automate Ray's genius. This section of the book features the idea of the bubble, and that Greg and those on the leadership team weren't always sure who and what to believe. This involved both the people within the organization and the data itself. Dalio's life, on the other hand, became a PR tour, as no one would have been able to know the inner workings of Bridgewater during that time. The book recounts the moment that things change. With a high-profile figure like Dalio, how can a leader possibly be accountable? And the answer is, they can't. So those that tried were brutally punished. The result was that all those who were in power became carbon copies of Dalio. Because Dalio could go anywhere at any time, there was an incredible amount of spying on each other and being encouraged to snitch. After a high-profile hire for several millions of dollars, the next task to assign would be to fix what Ray doesn't like. There was a constant effort to improve Ray's life, improve Ray's thinking, and above all, make Ray happy. After a certain point, Dalio's goal became very obvious. My goal is to make you not needed. And that's what we see here. When push came to shove, Greg is cast out, and another takes his place. Dalio hires Jim Comey, former FBI director, to handle these sorts of issues. The author describes a situation where he was asked a direct question and had to give his answer as to whether he should do something about it. With this, the people were under constant supervision. Comey is quickly put in charge of personnel decisions. One was with a woman named Leah, who was not performing up to standard. Jim is fully indoctrinated. He gets what this place is about. What to outsiders seems absolutely insane was fully rational to those inside of the Bridgewater bubble. The author states this was the key to what was happening. There was a point in time where Ray lost his mind, and those around him became yes men. Moving on, there are other people who get in the way. People who want to change the situation. One such person is Paul McDowell. And part 2 ends with a focus on two concepts, which are in conflict to each other: power and vision. As the book enters part 3, the firm is facing some new challenges. First, to define where and what is badness. And second, to force and instill the culture so that it is spread amongst the rest of Bridgewater. The question is, did Ray pick his next successor? What is interesting is that Ray still cannot give up power or authority, the author writes, and begins to wonder what makes him tick. What is behind his success and style? Here's where the story shifts to power dynamics and relationships. How would he get people to conform? Is he always right? What was the solution for this? This turns the company upside down as workers spy on each other and the culture becomes negative and vicious. Enter one key and prominent concept called the dot collector. This app was meant to measure people. What are the benefits of others? And it was rolled out firm-wide so that this system can catch all dissent. This creates a situation that many found unsafe. Amongst the key challenges in the process is to create an algorithm. And what happens is there starts to be a huge emphasis on this rating process. So to maintain a degree of trust, you can't actually say what you think. There's a tension here. There was a near constant influx of new rules. The principles grew to over 300. And there were consequences depending on your score. If the top score was over 9, that meant you'd be inducted into the inner circle and be on path to become a true Principalian. The author writes of one story where Ray makes one direct report, take a look at their body and physical attributes and make judgments. And that made all wonder, what is this place even about? In general, no one was equal. A caste system emerged where some people were considered of different DNA, which is eerily similar to other cults that have existed. This came with all sorts of abuses. The culture at Bridgewater was bad. It was all about control and having the best performing investment firm, and very few people on Wall Street knew it. Part 3 culminates with another key story. This time, another contender emerges. It is Bob Prince. There is one caveat though. Prince must be a true believer. The year is 2007. It is Thanksgiving, and the scene is the Park Avenue apartment owned by the Liebs. One figure is out of place, Ray Dalio, who the author sets up as someone different than the blue bloods that run the stock market. The author then writes of the ways that Dalio and the elite that surround him at all times would be threatened. Not everyone was a fan of this cult, but it was dangerous to be so vocal about your dissent. The author tells the specific story of someone who goes on tape and says there wasn't that sense of community or values. And his punishment, it was just a few dollars worth of supplies. Then the author tells of a woman who had a very similar result. Part 4 gets into more of the details of the firings, of those that tried to ascend to the top. The author walks through those that were trying to get to the top and take command, but the theme that was consistent throughout the book was that the most talented would always have Re to answer to. The author, now deeply entrenched in the company, can't get out. There is no one who isn't affected. As one woman who worked for Bridgewater told the author, "If you speak up, it is so much worse." Because that's going against the entire model. The author has to deal with being under constant duress and the lack of a real leader. As Ray is now absent again in favor of book tours. And even so, there was no easy way out. Many who left found they had trouble getting jobs afterwards. It was as if they were being actively blocked. It was at that time that those who didn't make the cut realized. There's something very different about those that get to the top, and the top is always one person. In 2013, though, it appears that the story has come full circle. Jim Comey now finds himself also under fire. He has become one of them. He was a pawn being used for someone else's gain. The best, most talented people become subservient to the game. It's the 40th anniversary at Bridgewater, and Ray was still doing the same stuff over and over. As the years passed, there was increasing fear by those under Dalio, and in particular, one woman whom the author now spotlights. By mid-2018, the story became ever more clear. Dalio, for one reason or another, now had a target on one particular woman. And those around him were now having to ask if this was some form of retribution or pattern. By this point, the women could be called a whistleblower if the action or issue was illegal. The author describes the two having a conversation and says there were only 4 questions that the people really want. From there, the scene is set with the people having to choose a leader of the free people. She refuses to give in. So begins the tale of another one leaving. The details that follow on the scene are really intense. It is described that some had to leave and seek psychiatric care. The book touches on Ray as some external force, like God, where you're meant to thank him for the food. It's now a religion. The author pivots to a more philosophical look at what Dalio is. He says some were describing Dalio as a Ray man. And as this story goes into present day, we find that the company was also going through that. The author finds himself there again and makes a comment that will cost him more as he asks a question about the relationship between Dalio and the Black Swan situation. Dalio's behavior changed, so he says. Dalio, now out for revenge, takes what was meant to be a nice speech to the employees and begins the journey toward a more negative result. From there, the tone turns dark as the story becomes about the process of being punished. One main fact the author finds is that Dalio would find that the key to success was just the principles, and would not accept or entertain any other viewpoint. Dalio gets more agitated, more mean. At some point, it went beyond what those under him were doing. The problem was they were getting the wrong results. There was a point of no return. It was that point that one character, Jen Healy, was ready to go out in the field. The author discusses that this was a turning point. The author sees now there was really a chance for things to get set up, for an opportunity for the principals to be more. But something happened. She starts doing what she's supposed to do, but gets shut out and was not there. And there is a new character who makes the mistake of bringing up a negative relationship between a certain person and an older relationship. From this point forward, the show to the outside looks the same. But people were now gone, leaving everyone wondering what is going to be seen in the future. So Ray brings in an attorney, and all those in the legal team say, it can't be a good thing when an attorney is being brought in. And how everything changes when the author realizes that Dalio doesn't care. The author is told, after all that, the great thing about all of this, you will find what your true path really is. And all the characters that have come in get that they were being told something. They are just a cog in the machine. And the thing that made Ray tick was not for all others. And there is a sad point where you realize if the people are not as great, it is as if they don't meet the standards to play with them. There were 2 big things this story has to offer. #1. It is a place that makes someone really, really rich. #2. No one knows or says that you are not great. But no one has a chance to get there. What would have happened is no one came along with the story. The author discusses that the company was about to be lost. The people left would get money. The author now was trying to figure out what is the key to make people come along. What the author writes is that there has to be an easy way. It becomes clear that the only key that Dalio has to take is the ability to be the best he can be. The problem, as noted by the author, was to be like a character in 1940s television. You must have the great life. You must have good kids. You must be ready for the great times in the future. However, it was clear from his family that all was not good. His son passes away from a tragic accident. At first, he had tried to keep things separate. It was all about the future. One quote in the book that really hits hard is that as the author gets closer to the end of the book, nothing could be certain. Except that someone was there for Ray's taking. After the tragedy, Dalio says he has come up with something new, that the best thing you can be is not one great guy, but that you are all having what you think. The author summarizes how many of the points that Dalio was making over his career may have led to a moment where no one can understand that you can't have it all. The story ends with more high-profile moves from the main characters, with the final summary being that it was Ray's decision, Ray's hand, Ray's machine. Ultimately, the fund paints a portrait of Ray Dalio as a brilliant but complex figure. A man who has built a highly successful hedge fund while also creating a unique and often unsettling organizational culture. The book raises questions about the price of success and what happens when a company's values are shaped by the personality of a single individual. The big takeaway from Copeland's The Fund is that even in the world of high finance, human nature remains a powerful force. Radical transparency can be a double-edged sword. While openness and honesty are valuable, they can also be used to justify ruthless behavior and create a culture of fear. The pursuit of excellence can come at a cost. Striving for perfection is admirable, but not if it leads to burnout, mental health issues, and a lack of empathy. Power and control can corrupt, even with good intentions. A leader's vision can become distorted when unchecked, leading to a cult-like atmosphere and the suppression of dissenting voices. Some heuristics to remember from The Fund are: taste the soup is the process of analyzing what the employee is doing, even if it's gross to do so. Shoot the ones you love is a reference to making sure they are being truthful and not harming the company. Document all deviations of power. It is always best to take notes, because someone might be plotting against you. There is no cycle of history, as quoted by Niall Ferguson when discussing why his research and model were different than Dalio's. There's too many forces at play for any human being to understand all of it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.